I spent Christmas Eve alone in a hospital bed, watching the snow fall outside my window while my family celebrated without me. And when I finally understood they weren't coming back, I made a phone call that would change everything forever. What happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who show you exactly how little you're worth. And that's when you realize you have more power than they ever imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Lillian Torres, but everyone calls me Lily. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived in Denver, Colorado my entire life. I raised 4 children as a single mother after my husband Carlos died in a construction accident when I was 35, working 3 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on their backs. I cleaned office buildings at night, worked the lunch shift at a diner, and took in sewing on weekends, all while making sure my kids had everything they needed for school, sports, and whatever dreams they were chasing that week. For 37 years, I never missed a birthday, graduation, or holiday. I was the mother who drove across the state for soccer games, who stayed up until midnight helping with science projects, who somehow found money for prom dresses and college application fees, even when the electricity bill was overdue. I was the one who held them when they cried, celebrated their victories like they were my own, and loved them so fiercely that I forgot to save any of that energy for myself. Now, 3 of my children live within 20 minutes of me. Maria, my eldest at 47, works as a dental hygienist and lives in a beautiful house in Cherry Creek with her husband and 2 teenage sons. She drives a white BMW and takes vacations to places I've only seen in magazines. Roberto, my second oldest at 45, owns a successful plumbing business and just bought his 3rd rental property. He's married to a woman named Jennifer, who always looks at me like I'm something she stepped in. My youngest daughter, Sophia, is 41 and teaches high school English. She's divorced, raising twin girls, and still lives in the same modest neighborhood where I raised all of them. My oldest son, David, moved to Phoenix 15 years ago for work and rarely calls. The others stayed close, but close in distance doesn't always mean close in heart, and I learned that lesson the hard way on a cold December morning when everything I thought I knew about my family crumbled like old plaster. It started with chest pains on December 20th. I was in my kitchen preparing masa for tamales like I'd done every Christmas for 40 years, when the crushing weight hit my chest like a steel beam. The pain shot down my left arm, and I barely had time to think, "This is it," before I was on the floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, found me 3 hours later when she came to borrow sugar for her own holiday baking. She called 911, and I spent the next 4 days in intensive care at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital. The doctor said I'd had a moderate heart attack, nothing immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to require monitoring and a complete change in lifestyle. I was scared. More scared than I'd been since Carlos died, because for the first time in my life I felt truly fragile. I kept thinking about all the things I hadn't said, all the moments I'd wasted worrying about everyone else's problems, while ignoring the signs my own body had been giving me for months. I called Maria first, my hands shaking as I dialed her number from the hospital bed. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait?" I told her I was in the hospital, that I'd had a heart attack, and the line went quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Oh my God, Mom, are you okay? Which hospital?" When I told her, she said she'd be right there, but then I heard her husband in the background saying something about the boys' basketball tournament, and her voice changed. "Actually, let me call you back. I need to figure out some things here." She didn't call back that day. I tried Roberto next, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my hands were trembling. "Mijo, it's your mother. I'm at Presbyterian St. Joseph. I had a heart attack. Please call me." He texted back 6 hours later. "Sorry, Mom, swamped with work. Christmas rush. We'll try to stop by soon." Sophia was the only one who came that first day. She walked into my room at 8 in the evening, still wearing her teaching clothes and carrying a bag of vending machine snacks. She looked exhausted, and I could see the worry in her eyes as she sat down in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed. "Mom, why didn't you call me first?" she asked, taking my hand. I would have left work immediately. I wanted to tell her that I did call her first in my heart, but that I'd been trained by 47 years of motherhood to call the eldest child first, to follow the hierarchy I'd established when they were small. Instead, I just squeezed her hand and said, "You're here now, Mija. That's what matters." She stayed until visiting hours ended and promised to come back the next day. But when the next day came, she texted that one of the twins had come down with flu symptoms, and she couldn't risk bringing germs to the hospital. I understood, I really did, but understanding didn't make the empty chair beside my bed any less lonely. December 21st passed in a blur of nurses checking my vitals, doctors explaining my medication regimen, and the constant background noise of a hospital that never sleeps. I kept expecting someone to walk through my door, but the only visitors were Mrs. Chen and Father Martinez from my church, who brought me a small poinsettia and stayed to pray with me. On December 22nd, I called Maria again. This time she answered immediately, but I could hear Christmas music and laughter in the background. "Mom, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry I haven't made it over yet. It's been absolutely crazy here with Christmas preparations. The boys have tournaments, and I'm hosting Christmas Eve dinner for 23 people. You know how it is." I did know how it was. I'd hosted Christmas Eve dinner for 23 people many times, except I'd done it while working 3 jobs and raising 4 children alone. But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "I understand, Mija. Maybe after Christmas?" "Definitely. Once things calm down. Are you getting good care? Do you need anything?" I needed my family. I needed to know that after 47 years of putting everyone else first, someone would put me first for once. I needed to not spend Christmas in a hospital bed surrounded by strangers. But I said, "No, I'm fine. The nurses are very good." "Great. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Love you." The line went dead, and I stared at the phone for a long time, listening to the sound of monitors beeping and someone crying softly in the room next door. The nurses had decorated the hallways with silver tinsel and red bows, and there was a small artificial tree in the corner of the waiting area. But nothing could make this place feel like Christmas. December 23rd was a Saturday, and I spent most of it watching holiday movies on the small television mounted to the wall. Sophia called in the morning to check on me, but she sounded stressed. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but Emma's fever spiked again last night, and now Isabella is showing symptoms too. I can't leave them, and I definitely can't bring them to the hospital. I feel terrible." "Don't feel terrible, Mija. Take care of the girls." "I'll be fine." Roberto finally called that afternoon. "Mom, sorry I haven't been by. This week has been insane. 3 emergency calls. And Jennifer's been on my case about getting the house ready for Christmas. You know how she gets." I did know how Jennifer got. She got demanding and controlling, and treated me like I was an inconvenience in her perfect life. But Roberto was my son.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
And I'd learned long ago that criticizing his wife was the fastest way to lose him completely. "I understand, Mijo. Maybe you can stop by after Christmas?" "Yeah, definitely. Things will calm down after the holidays. You're feeling better, right? The doctor said you're going to be fine?" "Yes, they said I should be able to go home soon." "That's great, Mom. I'm glad you're okay. I'll talk to you soon." And then, he was gone too. That night, I lay in my hospital bed, listening to Christmas carols playing softly from the nurses' station and watching the snow fall outside my window. The hospital was quieter than usual, with only essential staff working the holiday weekend, and I felt more alone than I had since Carlos died. I thought about all the Christmas Eves I'd spent cooking and cleaning and wrapping presents, making sure everything was perfect for my children. I thought about the times I'd worked double shifts just to afford the toys they wanted, the times I'd gone without, so they could have more. I thought about the Christmas morning when Maria was 12, and desperately wanted a specific doll that was sold out everywhere. I'd driven to 17 different stores, finally finding it at a toy store in Colorado Springs, 2 hours away. I'd spent my grocery money on that doll, and we'd eaten beans and rice for a week afterward. But seeing her face on Christmas morning had been worth every sacrifice. I thought about the Christmas when Roberto was 16 and saving for a car. I had secretly been putting aside money for months, $20 here, $10 there, until I had enough for a down payment on a used Honda. I'd wrapped the car keys in a small box and put them under the tree, and when he opened it, he'd cried and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I thought about all the Christmas mornings when I'd watched my children's faces light up, when I'd felt like the richest woman in the world because I could give them joy. I thought about how I'd made every holiday special, even when I was exhausted, even when I was worried about money, even when I felt like I had nothing left to give. And now, when I needed them most, they were all too busy with their own Christmas preparations to spare a few hours for the woman who'd given them everything. December 24th arrived gray and cold, and I woke up to the sound of Christmas music playing in the hallway. The nurses had tried to make the day special, bringing around hot chocolate and cookies, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the loneliest Christmas Eve of my life. I called Maria one more time, hoping against hope that she might have found a way to visit. She answered on the first ring, but I could hear the chaos in the background. Children laughing, adults talking, the clatter of dishes being prepared. "Mom, I'm so glad you called. I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling?" "I'm okay, Mija. Just wanted to hear your voice. I wish I could be there with you, but you know how crazy today is. I've got the whole family here, and dinner is in a few hours. Roberto and Jennifer are here with the kids, and Sophia brought the twins even though they're still getting over that bug. It's a madhouse." My heart stopped. Sophia brought the twins? But she said they were sick. Oh, they're much better now. Kids bounce back so fast, you know. Anyway, I should probably get back to the kitchen. The turkey needs to be basted, and Jennifer is very particular about the timing. Maria, wait, you're all there? All of you? Well, not David, obviously. But yeah, Roberto, Sophia, all the grandkids. It's going to be a wonderful Christmas Eve. I just wish you could be here. The words hit me like a physical blow. They were all there, all of them, celebrating Christmas Eve together while I lay in a hospital bed alone. Sophia's twins weren't too sick to attend the family gathering, just too sick to risk visiting their grandmother in the hospital. Roberto wasn't too busy with work to celebrate with the family, just too busy to visit his mother. Maria wasn't too overwhelmed with preparations to spend time with her loved ones, just too overwhelmed to make time for me. Mom, are you there? I found my voice somehow, though it felt like it was coming from somewhere far away. Yes, I'm here. Good. Well, I really should go. The timer just went off for the rolls. But I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Maybe we can plan something for next weekend. Okay, Mija. Have a wonderful Christmas Eve. You too, Mom. Love you. The line went dead, and I sat there holding the phone, staring at the wall where someone had hung a small wreath with a red bow. The truth settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and undeniable. They hadn't forgotten about me. They hadn't been too busy or too stressed or too overwhelmed. They had simply chosen to celebrate Christmas without me. I was not their priority. I was not someone they felt they needed to include. I was not worth the minor inconvenience of a hospital visit during the holidays. I was just the mother who had given them everything, and now that I had nothing left to give, I was disposable. The tears came then, hot and bitter and full of 47 years of accumulated hurt. I cried for the Christmas mornings I'd spent alone in the kitchen, preparing magic for children who slept peacefully upstairs. I cried for the sacrifices I'd made that they'd never known about, the dreams I'd deferred so they could chase theirs. I cried for the woman I'd been before I became their mother, the woman who had wants and needs and desires of her own. But most of all, I cried for the realization that I had raised 4 children who were capable of leaving their mother alone in a hospital on Christmas Eve, and that somehow, in all my years of loving them, I had failed to teach them how to love me back. When the tears finally stopped, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt angry. Not the quick flash of irritation that comes and goes, but a deep, burning anger that started in my chest and spread through my entire body like electricity. I was angry at my children for their selfishness, but I was even angrier at myself for allowing it. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Harold Brennan, the lawyer who had handled Carlos's estate after his death, who had helped me navigate the complexities of life insurance and survivor benefits when I was too grief-stricken to think clearly. He was older now, probably in his 70s, but I'd kept in touch with him over the years, sending Christmas cards and the occasional update about my family. It was Christmas Eve, and it was after 7 in the evening, but I called anyway. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Lily, is that you?" "Hello, Harold. I'm sorry to call so late, especially on Christmas Eve." "Nonsense. You know you can call me anytime. Is everything all right? You sound upset." I looked around my empty hospital room, at the untouched Christmas cookies the nurses had brought, at the small television playing It's a Wonderful Life to an audience of 1. "Harold, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If I wanted to change my will, to remove my children as beneficiaries, could I do that?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle but serious. "Lily, what's happened? This doesn't sound like you." "I'm in the hospital, Harold. I had a heart attack 4 days ago. And my family, all of them, are celebrating Christmas Eve together right now. They're all healthy, they're all free, and not one of them has bothered to visit me." Another pause. "I'm so sorry, Lily. That must be incredibly painful." "It is, and it's opened my eyes to some things I didn't want to see. So I'm asking you again, can I change my will?" "Yes, you can. It's your estate, your decision. But Lily, this is a big step. Maybe you should take some time to think about it. Talk to your children. See if there's been some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Harold. They made their choice, and now I'm making mine. Can you come to the hospital tomorrow? I know it's Christmas Day, but I want to get this done as soon as possible. If this is really what you want, then yes, I can come tomorrow. But Lily, please, think carefully about this. Once you make this change, there's no going back from the hurt it will cause." I looked at the phone in my hand, at the screen showing the call duration ticking by, and I thought about the hurt I was feeling right now, the hurt of being abandoned by the people I'd loved most in the world. I thought about the years I'd spent putting their needs before my own, the dreams I'd sacrificed, the life I'd lived entirely in service to their happiness. "Harold, I've been thinking about this for 4 days, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life. They want to treat me like I don't matter? Then they can find out exactly how much I don't matter when I'm gone." "All right, Lily. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk through all your options." "Thank you, Harold." "And Harold, Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Lily. Try to get some rest." I hung up the phone and sat back against my pillows, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in 4 days, I wasn't waiting for someone to call, wasn't hoping for someone to visit, wasn't making excuses for my children's behavior. I was taking action, and it felt powerful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I reached for the notepad on my bedside table and began to write. I wrote down everything I could remember about my assets, my savings account, my small pension, the house I'd worked so hard to pay off. I wrote down the names of the charities I'd supported over the years, the causes I believed in, the organizations that had actually made a difference in people's lives. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the words on the page became a concrete plan for a future that didn't revolve around children who had forgotten how to love their mother. And for the first time since I'd entered this hospital, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, Christmas Day, dawned bright and clear. I woke up to the sound of someone playing Christmas carols on a piano in the hospital lobby, and for a moment I felt the familiar pang of loneliness. But then I remembered the phone call I'd made the night before, and the feeling passed quickly. I called the nurse's station and asked if I could have a shower and help washing my hair. I wanted to look presentable when Harold arrived, wanted to be the strong, dignified woman I'd been before I became someone who waited desperately for phone calls that never came. Maria called at 10 in the morning, her voice bright and cheerful. "Merry Christmas, Mom! How are you feeling this morning?" "I'm feeling very clear, Mija. Very clear about a lot of things." "That's great! I'm so glad you're feeling better. Listen, I can't talk long because we're about to do presents with the kids, but I wanted to call and wish you a Merry Christmas. Maybe we can plan something for next weekend? Maybe we can, Maria." Or maybe we can't. I guess we'll see. There was a pause, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. Mom, is everything okay? You sound different. I'm fine, Micha. I'm just learning some important lessons about family and priorities. Enjoy your Christmas morning. Okay, well, I love you, Mom. I'll talk to you soon. I love you too, Maria. More than you'll ever know. Roberto called an hour later, with the same cheerful tone, the same quick conversation, the same promise to visit soon. Sophia called after that, apologizing again for not being able to visit, explaining that the twins were still recovering and she didn't want to take any chances. With each call, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. These weren't the voices of children who were worried about their mother's health, who were counting the hours until they could see her again. These were the voices of people checking items off a list, fulfilling an obligation, managing a minor inconvenience. Harold arrived at 3 p.m, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a kind smile that hadn't changed in all the years I'd known him. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair completely white now, but his eyes were still sharp and compassionate. Lily, you look good considering everything you've been through. How are you really feeling? I'm feeling like I've been living in a dream for the past 47 years, and I just woke up. He sat down in the chair beside my bed and opened his briefcase, pulling out a yellow legal pad and a pen. Tell me what you want to do. I want to change my will completely. I want to remove my children as beneficiaries and leave everything to charity. I want to make sure they understand that actions have consequences, that treating people with disrespect has a price. Harold nodded slowly, making notes on his pad. That's certainly you're right, Lily, but I have to ask, have you considered talking to them first? Explaining how their behavior has hurt you? Sometimes people don't realize the impact of their actions. Harold, I've been explaining my feelings to my children for 47 years. I've been patient and understanding and forgiving, and all it's taught them is that they can treat me however they want, because I'll always be there, always love them, always put their needs first. Well, I'm done being patient, I'm done being understanding, and I'm done being treated like I don't matter. All right. Let's talk about the specifics. What assets are we dealing with? I pulled out the notepad I'd written on the night before and read him the list. My house, which was worth about $400,000. My savings account, which had $68,000 from years of careful budgeting and small investments. My pension, which would pay out a lump sum of $45,000 to my beneficiaries. My life insurance policy, which would pay out $100,000. So we're talking about roughly $600,000, Harold said, writing down the numbers. That's a substantial inheritance you're talking about redirecting. Yes, it is, and I know exactly where I want it to go. I told him about St. Jude's Children's Hospital, where I'd volunteered for years after my children were grown. I told him about the Denver Rescue Mission, where I'd served meals to homeless families every Thanksgiving. I told him about the scholarship fund at the community college where I'd taken night classes, trying to better myself even while raising 4 children alone. These organizations have been doing important work for years without expecting anything in return, I said. They've shown me more respect and appreciation in my volunteer hours than my own children have shown me in the past week. Harold finished writing and looked up at me. Lily, I want you to understand something. If you do this, if you cut your children out of your will completely, there's no going back. Even if they change their behavior, even if they apologize, the damage to your relationship will be permanent. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the question seriously, looking out the window at the snow-covered parking lot where families were walking together, carrying flowers and balloons and gifts for their hospitalized relatives. I thought about the Christmas Eve I'd spent alone, listening to the sounds of a celebration I wasn't invited to. I thought about the 47 years I'd spent putting my children's happiness before my own, and the 4 days I'd spent learning that none of that sacrifice meant anything to them. Harold, my relationship with my children is already damaged. It's been damaged for years, I just didn't want to admit it. I kept making excuses for their behavior, kept telling myself they were just busy, just stressed, just going through difficult times. But the truth is, they're selfish. They're entitled. And they've learned to be that way because I taught them that their needs were more important than anyone else's, including mine. And you think this will teach them differently? I think this will teach them that I'm not the weak, desperate woman they think I am. I think this will teach them that I have value, that I matter, that treating me with disrespect has consequences. And if they can't learn that lesson, then they're not the people I thought I raised, and they don't deserve what I've worked so hard to build. Harold closed his notepad and looked at me for a long moment. All right, Lily. I'll draw up the documents. But I want to include a provision that allows you to change your mind if you want to. A 30-day cooling-off period before the changes become final. That's fine, I said. But Harold, I won't be changing my mind. This isn't a decision I'm making out of anger or hurt feelings. This is a decision I'm making out of self-respect, and that's not something I'm going to talk myself out of. He stood up and closed his briefcase. I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow afternoon. Are you sure you want to do this on December 26th? I'm sure. I want to start the new year with a clean slate, with a will that reflects my real values, not just my biological obligations. Harold squeezed my shoulder gently. I'll see you tomorrow, Lily. And for what it's worth, I think you're one of the strongest women I've ever known. It takes courage to stand up for yourself, especially when it means standing up to the people you love most. After he left, I sat alone in my hospital room, watching the sun set through the window. I thought about the conversation I'd just had, about the decision I'd made, and I waited for the regret to come, for the voice in my head that would tell me I was making a terrible mistake. But the regret never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. For the first time in my adult life, I was making a decision based on what I needed, what I deserved, what was right for me. I wasn't considering how my children would feel, or how my decision might affect their plans, or whether I was being too harsh or too demanding. I was simply being honest about what I was worth and what I was willing to accept from the people who claimed to love me. The rest of Christmas Day passed quietly. I watched movies, read a book one of the nurses had brought me, and ate the special Christmas dinner the hospital had prepared. It wasn't the worst Christmas I'd ever had, because for the first time in years, I wasn't disappointed by anyone's behavior. I wasn't waiting for phone calls that might not come, or visits that might be canceled at the last minute. I was just being present in my own life, making my own decisions, and taking responsibility for my own happiness. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Maria called one last time. Mom, I just wanted to call and say goodnight. I hope you had a nice Christmas day, even though you were stuck in the hospital. I had a very productive Christmas day, Misha. Very productive indeed. That's great, Mom. I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh, and I wanted to tell you, we're planning a belated Christmas celebration for next weekend. Nothing fancy, just family dinner and presents. You should be out of the hospital by then, right? Yes, I should be out by then. Perfect, so we'll plan on having you over on Saturday. I'll make your favorite, that chicken casserole you love. Maria, can I ask you something? Of course, Mom. Why now? Why are you planning this belated celebration now, when you couldn't find time to visit me when I was scared and alone? There was a pause, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice. Mom, I explained all that. It was Christmas Eve, and I had 23 people here, and the boys had tournaments, and you know how crazy the holidays are. Yes, I do know how crazy the holidays are. I spent 47 years making sure they were perfect for you and your brothers and sister. I know exactly how much work it takes to prepare a Christmas celebration. Right, so you understand why I couldn't make it to the hospital. No, Mija, I don't understand. I understand that you made a choice to prioritize your Christmas party over your mother's health. I understand that you decided your guests were more important than the woman who raised you. I understand that you chose convenience over love. Mom, that's not fair. You're making it sound like I don't care about you. Do you care about me, Maria? Do you really? Of course I do. You're my mother. Then why am I spending Christmas alone in a hospital bed while you celebrate with everyone else I love? There was another pause, longer this time. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry you're upset, but I can't change what happened. I had responsibilities, commitments. I can't just drop everything every time something happens. Every time something happens? Maria? I had a heart attack. I could have died. This wasn't me calling because I was lonely or bored. This was me needing my family when I was facing my own mortality. But you're fine now, right? The doctor said you're going to be fine. Yes, I'm going to be fine. But not because of anything you did. Mom, I don't understand why you're being so mean about this. I said I'm sorry, and I'm planning a nice dinner for next weekend. Can't we just move past this? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Maria, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not being mean. I'm being honest. And the honest truth is that I've learned something important about my family this week. I've learned that when I really need you, you're not there. I've learned that my love and my sacrifices and my 47 years of putting you first don't mean enough to you to inconvenience your holiday plans. That's not true, Mom. You know I love you. I know you love the idea of me, Maria. I know you love having a mother who's always available, always understanding, always willing to put your needs first. But I don't think you love me, the actual person, enough to be there when I need you. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything, Mija. You've already said everything I needed to hear. Have a good night. I hung up the phone and turned off the light, lying in the darkness of my hospital room and listening to the sounds of the night shift beginning their rounds. I thought about the conversation I'd just had, about the pain in Maria's voice when she realized I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. But I also thought about the strength I'd felt, the clarity that came from speaking the truth instead of protecting everyone else's feelings. I thought about the will I would sign tomorrow, about the message it would send, about the future I was creating for myself. For the first time in 4 days, I fell asleep without crying. I fell asleep feeling like I was exactly where I belonged, making exactly the right choices, finally putting my own needs first. Tomorrow I would take the next step in reclaiming my life. Tomorrow I would stop being the woman who waited for her children to remember they had a mother, and start being the woman who knew her own worth. Tomorrow I would become someone who couldn't be ignored. I was discharged from the hospital on December 27th, and the first thing I did when I got home was sit at my kitchen table and spread out every financial document I owned. Bank statements, insurance policies, property deeds, investment portfolios that I'd carefully built over decades of saving $5 here and $10 there, even when my children thought I had nothing. The truth was, I had been far more financially savvy than any of them realized, and as I looked at the numbers in front of me, I felt a grim satisfaction, knowing they were about to discover just how much they'd underestimated their mother. My house alone was worth $420,000, not the $400,000 I'd told Harold. Property values in my neighborhood had increased significantly in the past year, and I'd been quietly watching the market, knowing that this modest 3-bedroom ranch I'd bought for $38,000 in 1978 had become quite valuable. The house where I'd raised 4 children, where I'd celebrated every birthday and graduation and holiday, where I'd cried myself to sleep after Carlos died, and somehow found the strength to keep going the next morning. But it wasn't just the house. Over the years I'd been investing small amounts in a diversified portfolio that my neighbor Mrs. Chen's son had helped me set up. He was a financial advisor, and he'd been impressed by my discipline and consistency. Every month, without fail, I'd invested whatever I could spare, even if it was just $50. The account now held over $115,000, money my children knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to ask about my finances beyond whether I needed help paying bills. I also had my pension from the hospital where I'd worked as a custodian for 12 years before starting my own small cleaning business. The lump sum payout would be $57,000, not the $45,000 I'd estimated. And my life insurance policy, which I'd maintained faithfully even during the leanest years, would pay out $125,000 to my beneficiaries. As I added up the numbers, I realized I was looking at an estate worth nearly $700,000. More money than any of my children had ever imagined their working-class mother possessed. Money that represented decades of sacrifice, careful planning, and the kind of quiet financial wisdom that comes from raising 4 children on a single income. I thought about Roberto, who was always complaining about his mortgage payments despite owning a successful plumbing business. I thought about Maria, who'd just spent $15,000 on a kitchen renovation and constantly posted photos of her expensive vacations on social media. I thought about Sophia, who was struggling as a single mother but had been too proud to ask for help, and David in Phoenix, who'd called exactly twice in the past 2 years. They had all assumed I was just getting by, that I had nothing substantial to leave behind. They treated me like I was a burden, like spending time with me was charity work they couldn't quite fit into their busy schedules. But I had built something significant, something that could change their lives or the lives of people who actually deserved it. Harold came to my house on December 28th to finalize the will documents. I made coffee in the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals for my ungrateful children, and we sat at the same table where I'd helped them with homework, listened to their problems, and celebrated their achievements. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now sitting in the same spot, planning to erase them from my legacy. "Lily, I brought several versions of the documents," Harold said, pulling papers from his briefcase. "The first completely removes your children as beneficiaries and divides everything among the charities you specified. The second leaves them each a token amount, say $5,000, which makes it clear the omission was intentional, not an oversight. The third gives them one final chance to redeem themselves." "What do you mean by that?" "We could include a clause that requires them to meet certain conditions to inherit. For instance, they could be required to spend a specific amount of time caring for you or contributing to your care before they become eligible for their inheritance. It's a way of ensuring they understand the value of family obligations." I considered this option, imagining my children suddenly becoming attentive and caring, knowing their inheritance depended on it. But the thought made me feel sick. I didn't want their forced affection, their calculated kindness. I wanted genuine love and respect, and if they weren't capable of giving that freely, I didn't want anything from them at all. "Harold, I want the first option. Complete removal. I don't want them to get a single dollar from my estate." "Are you absolutely certain? This is a significant decision, Lily. Your estate is substantial enough to provide financial security for your children and grandchildren. My children already have financial security. They have jobs, homes, education, opportunities. All things I made possible by sacrificing my own comfort and dreams. If they need money, they can work for it the way I did. As for my grandchildren, they have parents who should be responsible for providing for them." Harold nodded and pulled out the appropriate documents. "Let's go through the beneficiaries then. You mentioned St. Jude's Children's Hospital, the Denver Rescue Mission, and the Community College Scholarship Fund." "Yes, but I've been thinking about the distribution. I want 50% to go to St. Jude's, 30% to the Denver Rescue Mission, and 20% to establish a scholarship fund at Front Range Community College for single mothers returning to school." "That's very generous, Lily. These organizations will be able to do tremendous good with this kind of funding. They've earned it. I've volunteered with all of them over the years, and I've seen the difference they make in people's lives. Real differences. Not just pretty words and empty promises." As Harold prepared the final documents, I walked through my house, looking at the family photos that lined the hallways and covered every surface. Pictures of my children at various ages, school photos and graduation pictures, wedding photos, and baby pictures of grandchildren I barely knew. For so many years, these images had brought me joy, reminding me of the family I'd built and the love I'd poured into raising my children. Now they felt like evidence of a crime, documentation of how thoroughly I'd been taken advantage of. In every picture, I could remember the circumstances, the sacrifices I'd made to be present for those moments. The overtime shifts I'd worked to pay for the graduation dress Maria wore in her high school photo. The second job I'd taken to afford Roberto's wedding reception. The vacation days I'd used to help Sophia move into her first apartment after her divorce. I'd been the photographer for most of these pictures, the one behind the camera, making sure everyone else looked perfect while I remained invisible. Even in the few photos where I appeared, I looked tired, worn down by the constant effort of holding everyone else up. When had I stopped being the subject of my own life and become just the supporting character in everyone else's story? In my bedroom, I opened the jewelry box that held the few pieces Carlos had given me over the years. My engagement ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had seemed like the most beautiful thing in the world when he'd proposed. A pearl necklace he'd saved for months to buy me for our 5th anniversary. A pair of silver earrings he'd given me after Sophia was born, telling me I deserved something beautiful to celebrate bringing such beauty into the world. I'd planned to leave these pieces to my daughters, to Sophia and Maria, hoping they would think of me whenever they wore them. But now I realized they would probably just sell them, turn them into cash, to spend on things that mattered more to them than memories of their mother. Instead, I decided to donate them to a women's shelter, where they could be sold to fund programs for women who actually needed help, women who were fighting to build better lives for themselves and their children. Harold found me in the bedroom, holding Carlos's wedding ring, which I'd kept in the jewelry box since the day he died. "Lily, the documents are ready for your signature. Are you sure you want to do this today?" "I'm sure, Harold. I've never been more sure of anything." We returned to the kitchen table, and Harold spread out the documents, explaining each section carefully. The language was formal and legal, but the meaning was clear. Upon my death, everything I owned would go to charity. My children, who had expected to inherit the fruits of my lifetime of labor, would receive nothing. "There's one more thing we should discuss," Harold said as I prepared to sign. "Your children are going to contest this will. They're going to claim you were mentally incompetent, that you were coerced, that this doesn't represent your true wishes. We need to be prepared for that battle. What do you recommend? I want you to undergo a psychological evaluation to establish your mental competency. I want documented proof that you're making this decision with full awareness of the consequences. I also want you to prepare a video statement explaining your reasoning, something we can present to the court if necessary. The idea of having to prove my sanity just to make decisions about my own property angered me, but I understood the necessity. Fine. Whatever it takes to make sure my wishes are honored." "Good. I can arrange for Dr. Patricia Hendricks to conduct the evaluation. She's a respected psychologist who specializes in competency assessments. The video statement we can do today if you're comfortable with that." I signed the will documents, my signature firm and clear, and we proceeded to set up Harold's small video camera in my living room. As I sat facing the lens, I thought about what I wanted to say, how I wanted to explain the decision I'd made. I wanted my words to be clear, rational, and unambiguous, so that no one could claim I'd been confused or manipulated. My name is Lilian Maria Torres, and I am 72 years old. Today is December 28th, 2024, and I am recording this statement to explain why I have chosen to disinherit my 4 children and leave my entire estate to charitable organizations. I paused, looking directly into the camera, imagining my children watching this video someday, seeing the disappointment and determination in my eyes. For 47 years, I have been a devoted mother. I raised 4 children as a single parent after my husband Carlos died in a construction accident. I worked multiple jobs, sacrificed my own comfort and dreams, and put my children's needs before my own in every decision I made. I believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a good mother meant making myself invisible so my children could shine. I was wrong. Love should be mutual. Respect should be earned and given. Family relationships should be based on genuine care and consideration, not just biological obligation. My children have shown me, through their actions and their absence, that they do not value the sacrifices I made for them. They do not respect the woman who gave up everything to ensure their success and happiness. On December 20th, I suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized for 7 days. During that time, my 3 local children found time to celebrate Christmas Eve together, with their spouses and children, but could not find time to visit their mother in the hospital. They made excuses about being busy, about having obligations, about not wanting to bring germs to the hospital. But the truth is, they simply did not prioritize my well-being or my emotional needs. I am not making this decision out of anger or spite. I am making it out of self-respect and a desire to ensure that my life's work benefits people who will appreciate and honor it. The charities I have chosen to support have shown me more kindness and consideration in my volunteer hours than my own children have shown me in recent years. If my children are watching this video, I want them to understand that this is not about punishment. This is about consequences. This is about learning that treating people with disrespect and neglect has a price. I hope that someday they will understand the lesson I am trying to teach them, even if it comes too late to change the outcome of my estate. I am of sound mind and body. I understand the full implications of my decision. This will represents my true wishes, and I expect it to be honored upon my death. Harold turned off the camera and packed it back into his briefcase. That was perfect, Lily. Clear, rational, and emotionally compelling. If your children try to contest this will, that video will be powerful evidence of your mental state and your reasoning. When will I meet with the psychologist? I'll call Dr. Hendricks today and try to schedule something for this week. The sooner we document your competency, the stronger our position will be. After Harold left, I sat alone in my house, looking at the copy of my new will that he'd left with me. The document was only 5 pages long, but it represented a complete transformation of my legacy. Instead of enriching 4 people who had taken my love for granted, my life's work would fund medical research for children, provide meals and shelter for homeless families, and give educational opportunities to women who were struggling to build better lives for themselves and their children. I felt a strange sense of peace, as if I'd finally aligned my values with my actions. For too many years, I'd been enabling my children's selfishness by always being available, always understanding, always putting their needs first. I'd taught them that they could treat me however they wanted because I would always love them unconditionally. But unconditional love, I now realized, had made them weak. It had taught them that actions don't have consequences, that they could be thoughtless and cruel without losing anything that mattered to them. In trying to be a loving mother, I had failed to teach them how to be loving children. My phone rang that evening, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sophia, calling with her usual apologetic tone. "Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't get to see you before you were discharged. The twins are finally feeling better, and I was hoping I could come by tomorrow with some groceries and maybe help you get settled back in." "That's very thoughtful of you, Mija, but I'm fine. I got settled in just fine on my own." "Are you sure? I feel terrible about not being there when you needed me. I know this week has been really hard." "Yes, it has been hard, but it's also been educational." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've learned some important things about my family and about myself. I've learned that I've been making some poor choices for a very long time." "Mom, you're scaring me. You sound so different. Are you sure you're feeling okay? Maybe you should have stayed in the hospital longer." "I'm feeling better than I have in years, Sophia. I'm feeling clear about things for the first time in a long time." "Well, I'm coming over tomorrow, whether you think you need help or not. I want to see for myself that you're okay. If you want to visit, you're welcome to. But don't come out of guilt or obligation. If you come because you actually want to spend time with me, not because you feel bad about leaving me alone in the hospital." There was a pause, and I could hear the hurt in her voice when she spoke again. "Mom, of course I want to spend time with you. You're my mother, I love you." "Do you, Sophia? Do you really love me? Or do you love the idea of having a mother who's always available when you need something? I don't understand why you're asking me that." "Of course I love you." "Then why haven't you visited me in 3 months? Why do you only call when you need something? Why was it so easy for you to stay away from the hospital when I was scared and alone?" "Mom," I explained about the twins being sick. "I couldn't risk bringing germs to the hospital. But you could risk bringing them to Maria's house for Christmas Eve dinner?" The line went quiet, and I knew she was realizing that I was aware of the family gathering I'd been excluded from. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defensive. "How did you know about that?" "Maria mentioned it when she called me on Christmas Eve. While I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering if any of my children cared whether I lived or died, you were all celebrating together. You chose to protect me from germs, but not from loneliness. You chose to keep the twins away from the hospital, but not from a house full of relatives. Do you see the contradiction there, Mija?" "Mom, it wasn't like that. It was complicated." "No, Sophia, it was simple. You had a choice between spending Christmas Eve with your family or visiting your mother in the hospital. And you chose your family. The problem is, I thought I was your family, too." I could hear her crying now, soft sobs that might have broken my heart a week ago, but I felt strangely detached from her tears, as if I was watching someone else's drama unfold. "Mom, please don't say things like that. You are my family. You're the most important person in my life." "If that were true, Sophia, you would have found a way to see me when I needed you most. You would have moved heaven and earth to make sure I wasn't alone on Christmas Eve. But you didn't, because I'm not actually the most important person in your life. I'm just the person you call when you need something." That's not fair. What's not fair is a mother spending Christmas Eve alone in a hospital bed while her children party without her. What's not fair is 47 years of sacrifice being repaid with neglect and excuses. What's not fair is me pretending that everything is fine when it's not. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry I didn't visit you in the hospital. I'm sorry you spent Christmas Eve alone. I'm sorry you're hurt and angry. What else can I do? You can understand that sorry isn't enough anymore, Sophia. You can understand that some things can't be fixed with an apology and a promise to do better next time. You can understand that I'm done accepting behavior that I would never accept from a stranger. Are you saying you don't want to see me anymore? Are you cutting me out of your life? I'm saying that if you want to be part of my life, you need to show me that I'm part of yours. Real actions, not just words. Real commitment, not just convenience. I don't understand what that means. It means you have some thinking to do, Misha. And so do I. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my empty house, thinking about the conversation I'd just had. Sophia was the one child who had shown any real remorse, who seemed to understand that she'd hurt me. But understanding wasn't enough. Feeling bad about your behavior isn't the same as changing it. I thought about the years I'd spent making excuses for my children, accepting their half-hearted efforts and their empty promises. I thought about all the times I'd told myself that they were just busy, just going through difficult periods, just needing time to mature. I'd been enabling their selfishness by accepting it, by never demanding better. The next morning, I had an appointment with Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the psychologist Harold had recommended. Her office was in a professional building downtown, and as I sat in the waiting room, I wondered what questions she would ask, what tests she would conduct to determine whether I was mentally competent to make decisions about my own estate. Dr. Hendricks was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put me at ease immediately. She explained that the evaluation would involve a series of questions and cognitive tests designed to assess my mental state, my understanding of my situation, and my capacity to make informed decisions. Mrs. Torres, can you tell me why you're here today? I'm here because I've made the decision to change my will, and my attorney wants to establish that I'm mentally competent to make that decision. Can you tell me about the changes you're making? I'm removing my 4 children as beneficiaries and leaving my entire estate to charitable organizations. That's a significant change. Can you explain what led to this decision? I told her about the hospital stay, about being abandoned on Christmas Eve, about the years of feeling taken for granted and disrespected. I explained my reasoning calmly and clearly, without becoming emotional or defensive. I wanted her to see that this wasn't a decision made in anger or confusion, but a rational response to a pattern of behavior that had become unacceptable. Do you understand the consequences of this decision? Do you understand that your children will receive nothing from your estate? Yes, I understand completely. I also understand that my estate is substantial enough to make a real difference in the lives of people who will appreciate and honor it. Have you considered less drastic alternatives? Perhaps reducing their inheritance rather than eliminating it entirely? I've considered every alternative, Dr. Hendricks, but I've come to understand that half measures don't teach lessons. My children need to understand that there are consequences for treating people badly, even if those people are family members who love them. We continued talking for over an hour, and Dr. Hendricks administered several cognitive tests to assess my memory, reasoning ability, and decision-making capacity. I answered every question confidently, performed every task competently, and maintained my composure throughout the evaluation. Mrs. Torres, based on our conversation and the tests we've conducted, I see no indication of cognitive impairment or mental incompetence. You demonstrate clear understanding of your situation, sound reasoning ability, and appropriate emotional responses to the circumstances you've described. In my professional opinion, you are fully capable of making informed decisions about your estate. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. I appreciate your thoroughness. I will prepare a detailed report for your attorney documenting my findings. If your children choose to contest your will on the grounds of mental incompetence, this evaluation should provide strong evidence to the contrary. As I left Dr. Hendricks' office, I felt a sense of validation that I hadn't expected. Not only had she confirmed my mental competency, but she had listened to my story without judgment, without suggesting that I was being too harsh or unforgiving. She had treated my decision as the rational choice of a competent adult, not the emotional reaction of a hurt mother. That afternoon, Sophia came to visit as she had promised. I watched from my window as she pulled into my driveway, sitting in her car for several minutes before finally getting out. She looked nervous, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure what she would find when she knocked on my door. I let her in and offered her coffee, maintaining the polite but distant tone I'd adopted since my revelation about my family's true nature. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework countless times, where we'd planned her wedding and celebrated her daughter's birthdays. "Mom, you look good. Better than I expected after everything you've been through." "I feel good, Misha. Clearer than I've felt in years." "I brought you some groceries," she said, gesturing toward the bags she'd left by the door. "And I made you a casserole you can freeze for later. I know cooking probably seems overwhelming right now. That's thoughtful of you, but I've been cooking for myself just fine. In fact, I've been taking care of myself quite well for many years. It's something I'm good at." She looked around the kitchen, taking in the clean counters, the organized cabinets, the general sense of order that had always characterized my home. "This place looks exactly the same, like nothing has changed." "Everything has changed, Sophia. I've changed. My understanding of my relationships has changed. My expectations have changed. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I want you to know that I understand why you're upset. I should have found a way to visit you in the hospital. I should have made you the priority. I was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. I appreciate your apology, Mija, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about the hospital visit. This is about a pattern of behavior that has been going on for years. This is about the fact that I only hear from you when you need something, that you only include me in your life when it's convenient for you. That's not true, Mom. I call you regularly. You call me when you need babysitting. You call me when you're having problems with your ex-husband. You call me when you need money or help with something. But when was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you invited me to do something with you and the girls? When was the last time you made an effort to include me in your life just because you enjoyed my company?" She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her mentally reviewing our recent interactions, realizing the truth of what I was saying. "I guess I never thought about it that way. I always assumed you knew I loved you, that you understood how much you mean to me." "How would I know that, Sophia? How would I understand something you never show me? Love isn't just a feeling you carry around inside. Love is action. Love is making time for people. Love is showing up when they need you. Love is treating people like they matter. You're right, I haven't been showing you that you matter. I've been taking you for granted, assuming you would always be there no matter how I treated you. And I would have been there, Mija. That's the sad truth. I would have continued accepting your neglect and making excuses for your behavior because I was afraid of losing you completely. But what I realized in that hospital bed is that I had already lost you. I had lost all of you. You were all just going through the motions of having a relationship with me. Mom, that's not true. I do love you. We all love you. Then why am I so lonely, Sophia? Why do I spend most of my time alone wishing one of my children would call or visit? Why do I feel like I have to apologize for existing like I'm bothering you whenever I try to be part of your life?" She started crying then, and I felt a familiar urge to comfort her, to tell her everything would be fine, to minimize my own feelings to make her feel better. But I stayed seated, stayed calm, and let her feel the full weight of what I was saying. "I don't want you to be lonely, Mom. I don't want you to feel like you're bothering me. I want to do better. I want to show you that you matter to me. I hope that's true, Sophia. But I need you to understand that wanting to do better isn't enough anymore. I need to see actual changes. I need to see that you're making me a priority in your life, not just an obligation you check off when you have time. What can I do? Tell me what you need from me. I need you to call me once a week, not because you need something, but because you want to talk to me. I need you to include me in your plans sometimes, to invite me to the girls' school events and birthday parties. I need you to visit me regularly, not just when you feel guilty about neglecting me. I need you to treat me like I'm someone you actually enjoy spending time with. I can do that, Mom. I will do that. We'll see, Misha. Words are easy. Actions are harder. She stayed for another hour, and we talked more openly than we had in years. But I remained guarded, unwilling to let hope override the hard lessons I'd learned about my children's capacity for selfishness. Sophia meant well, I believed that. But meaning well wasn't enough to undo years of neglect. After she left, I called Harold to give him an update on the psychological evaluation and to confirm that all the legal documents were in order. He assured me that everything was proceeding smoothly and that Dr. Hendricks had already sent over her report confirming my mental competency. Lily, I have to ask, are you having any second thoughts? Your daughter's visit today, did it change your perspective at all? No, Harold. If anything, it confirmed that I'm making the right decision. Sophia is sorry now because she's faced with the consequences of her behavior. But being sorry after you're caught is different from being genuinely remorseful. I need to see sustained changes in her behavior before I consider whether she deserves to inherit the fruits of my labor. And the others? Roberto and Maria. Haven't heard from either of them since Christmas Day. I'm sure they're assuming this will all blow over. That I'll go back to being the understanding, forgiving mother I've always been. They're going to be very surprised when they realize how wrong they are. That evening, I sat in my living room, reading through the documents Harold had prepared. Everything was in order, legally binding, and designed to withstand any challenges my children might mount. As I read through the detailed descriptions of how my estate would be distributed, I felt a deep satisfaction knowing that my life's work would benefit people who truly needed help. The scholarship fund for single mothers would be established with my name attached, ensuring that my story would be remembered as part of the application process. Future recipients would know that their education was being funded by a woman who had overcome tremendous challenges to build a better life for herself and her family, a woman who understood the value of hard work and determination. St. Jude's Children's Hospital would receive enough money to fund significant research initiatives, potentially leading to breakthroughs that could save children's lives. The Denver Rescue Mission would be able to expand their programs, providing meals and shelter for more families who were struggling to survive. My money would make a real difference in the world, would honor the values I'd tried to instill in my children but had failed to sustain. It would be a legacy I could be proud of. A final statement about what mattered to me and what kind of person I had chosen to become. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the week that had changed everything, the 7 days that had opened my eyes to truths I'd been avoiding for years. I thought about the woman I had been before my heart attack, the woman who had measured her worth by how much she could give to others, who had believed that love meant accepting whatever scraps of attention and affection her children chose to offer. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone who understood her own value, who demanded respect, who refused to accept less than she deserved. The new Lily Torres was someone I was just beginning to get to know, but I liked her strength, her clarity, her refusal to compromise her dignity for the illusion of family harmony. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase of my new life, the phase where I stopped waiting for my children to remember they had a mother and started building relationships with people who actually valued my presence. I would continue my volunteer work, expand my social circle, and maybe even pursue some of the dreams I'd deferred for so many years. I had given 47 years of my life to raising and supporting my children. Now it was time to give the rest of my years to myself, to discover who Lily Torres could become when she stopped defining herself solely as someone's mother and started thinking of herself as a complete person with her own needs, wants, and desires. The future felt uncertain but also exciting in a way it hadn't for decades. I was finally free to make choices based on what I wanted, not what my children needed. I was finally free to be selfish, to put my own happiness first, to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. And if my children didn't like the woman I was becoming, if they couldn't accept a mother who demanded to be treated with respect and consideration, then they would learn to live without me. Because I had finally learned something they had never bothered to teach me. I was worth more than their convenience, their guilt, and their half-hearted love. I was worth everything. The confrontation I'd been expecting finally came on a cold January morning, when all 3 of my local children showed up at my door unannounced. I watched through my front window as they congregated on my driveway, clearly having planned this intervention together. Maria was gesticulating wildly, Roberto looked agitated, and Sophia kept glancing nervously toward the house. They'd finally discovered that their inheritance was in jeopardy, and they'd come to stage what they probably thought would be a successful guilt campaign. I let them knock 3 times before I opened the door, and when I did, I stood in the doorway without inviting them in. The cold January air rushed past me, but I didn't step aside or gesture them toward the warmth of my living room. If they wanted to have this conversation, they could have it on my terms. "Hello, children. This is an unexpected surprise." Maria stepped forward first, her face flushed with what I recognized as barely controlled anger mixed with desperation. "Mom, we need to talk. Sophia told us about some of the things you said to her, and we're very concerned about your mental state." "My mental state is excellent, thank you for asking. I've recently had a full psychological evaluation that confirms I'm completely competent to make my own decisions." Roberto moved closer, his jaw tight with the kind of aggressive posture he'd learned from his father-in-law. "Mom, we heard some crazy rumors about you changing your will. Please tell us that's not true." "It's not a rumor, Roberto, it's a fact. I have indeed changed my will." The 3 of them exchanged glances, and I could see the panic beginning to set in. They hadn't really believed it until this moment, had probably convinced themselves that Sophia was exaggerating or misunderstanding the situation. "Mom, can we please come inside and discuss this like a family?" Sophia asked, her voice pleading. "We can discuss it right here. I'm perfectly comfortable, and this conversation won't take very long." Maria's composure cracked first. "This is insane, Mom. You can't just cut your own children out of your will because you're mad about Christmas. We're your family. We love you. If you love me, Maria, you have a very strange way of showing it. Love isn't just words you say when you want something. Love is actions. Love is showing up when someone needs you. Love is making people feel valued and important." "We do value you," Roberto said, his voice rising. "Just because we couldn't visit you in the hospital doesn't mean we don't love you. We had obligations, responsibilities." "Yes, you did have responsibilities. Your responsibility to your mother, who raised you single-handedly after your father died. Your responsibility to the woman who worked 3 jobs to keep you fed and clothed and educated. Your responsibility to show some basic human decency to someone who spent 47 years putting your needs before her own." "Mom, please," Sophia interjected. "I know we made mistakes, but cutting us out of your will completely? That's so extreme. Can't we work this out?" "Sophia, you seem to think this is some kind of negotiation. It's not. This is the consequence of years of neglect and disrespect. This is what happens when you take someone for granted for so long that you forget they're a human being with feelings and needs." Maria's voice turned sharp and ugly. "So this is about money? This is about punishing us financially because we hurt your feelings?" "This isn't about money, Maria. This is about respect. This is about recognizing that I have value beyond what I can provide for you. But since you brought up money, let me ask you something. How much do you think I'm worth?" They looked at each other uncertainly, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question. "I don't know, Mom," Roberto said finally. "I never really thought about it." "Of course you didn't. You assumed I was just getting by, probably had a few $1,000s in savings and a house that might be worth something someday. You never bothered to ask about my finances, never showed any interest in my financial well-being, never offered to help me plan for my future. We figured you would ask if you needed help," Maria said defensively. "When have I ever asked any of you for help? When have I ever been anything but completely self-sufficient? Did it ever occur to you to wonder how I managed to live so comfortably on a modest income? Did you ever think to ask how I was able to help all of you financially over the years, while maintaining my own household?" The silence stretched between us, and I could see them beginning to realize that they had seriously underestimated their mother. "The truth is, I'm worth nearly $700,000. My house, my investments, my pension, my life insurance. $700,000 that I accumulated through careful planning, smart investing, and decades of living below my means so I could help my children when they needed it." Roberto's face went pale. "700,000? Mom, are you serious?" "Dead serious. And every penny of it is going to charity. St. Jude's Children's Hospital, the Denver Rescue Mission, and a scholarship fund for single mothers. Organizations that actually appreciate what I have to offer." Maria's mask of concern finally slipped completely. revealing the greed and entitlement I'd suspected was underneath. "You can't do this, Mom. We're your children. We deserve that money." "Deserve it? Based on what? What have any of you done to deserve it? Have you been attentive, loving children? Have you made me feel valued and appreciated? Have you included me in your lives in any meaningful way?" "We've been busy," Roberto said, as if that explained everything. "We have our own families, our own responsibilities." "Everyone is busy, Roberto. Busy is a choice. You make time for what matters to you, and I clearly don't matter to any of you enough to prioritize." Sophia stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I've been trying to do better. I've been calling you more, spending more time with you. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for something, Sophia. It shows me that you're capable of change when you're motivated. But it also shows me that you only changed your behavior when you realized there might be consequences for not changing it." "So, what do you want from us?" Maria demanded. "What do we have to do to get back in your will?" "There's nothing you can do, Maria. This decision is final. My will has been executed, my mental competency has been established, and my estate planning is complete." "We'll contest it," Roberto said angrily. "We'll take you to court. No judge is going to let you disinherit your own children because they didn't visit you in the hospital." "You're welcome to try, Roberto. But I should warn you that I've been very thorough in documenting my reasoning. I have a detailed psychological evaluation, a video statement explaining my decision, and extensive legal documentation of my mental competency. Any lawyer will tell you that a competent adult has the absolute right to dispose of their property as they see fit." Maria's voice turned vicious. "This is what we get for having a selfish, bitter old woman for a mother. Dad would be ashamed of what you've become." The comment hit like a physical blow, but I'd been expecting something like this. When people feel cornered, they lash out with whatever weapons they can find, and they knew that invoking Carlos would be the cruelest cut they could make. "Your father would be ashamed of the children we raised together. He would be heartbroken to see how his death affected not just me, but all of you. He would be devastated to know that his children grew up to be selfish, entitled adults who think love is something they're owed rather than something they earn." "Don't you dare talk about what Dad would think," Roberto said, his voice shaking with rage. "You're the one who's destroying this family." "I'm not destroying anything, Roberto. I'm simply refusing to pretend that we're a family when we're not. A family shows up for each other. A family makes sacrifices for each other. A family treats each other with love and respect. We stopped being a family years ago. I was just too afraid to admit it." "Fine," Maria said, her voice cold as ice. "If this is really what you want, if you really want to cut us out of your life, then consider it done. Don't call us when you need help. Don't expect us to take care of you when you get sick. Don't expect us to be there for your funeral. I don't expect anything from any of you anymore, Maria. That's the whole point. I'm done having expectations that you'll never meet. I'm done hoping you'll become the children I thought I raised. I'm done making excuses for your behavior and pretending it's acceptable." Sophia made one last desperate attempt. "Mom, please, there has to be some way to fix this, some way to prove to you that we love you." "Sophia, if you have to prove you love someone, then you don't really love them. Love isn't something you demonstrate when it's convenient or profitable. Love is something you show consistently, through your actions and your choices and your priorities." "So that's it?" Roberto asked. "You're just giving up on us?" "I'm not giving up on you, Roberto. I'm giving up on the fantasy that you're something you're not. I'm accepting the reality that my children are exactly who they've shown me they are. Selfish, entitled adults who see their mother as an obligation rather than a person they genuinely care about." They stood there for another moment, and I could see them processing the finality of what I was saying. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no way to manipulate or guilt me into changing my mind. For the first time in their adult lives, they were facing real consequences for their behavior, and they didn't know how to handle it. "This is a mistake, Mom," Maria said finally. "You're going to regret this." "The only mistake I made was waiting this long to stand up for myself. The only thing I regret is the years I wasted, hoping you would become better people." They turned and walked back to their cars without another word, and I watched them leave with a strange sense of relief. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, and it had gone exactly as I'd expected. No apologies, no genuine remorse, no acknowledgement of their behavior. Just anger and accusations and threats. As their cars disappeared down my street, I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling lighter than I had in years. The last vestiges of hope that my children might surprise me had finally died. And with that death came a kind of freedom I hadn't expected. Within a week, I received a letter from a law firm representing my children. They were indeed contesting the will, claiming that I was mentally incompetent and had been unduly influenced by my attorney. The letter was full of legal jargon designed to intimidate me, but Harold had prepared me for this possibility. "Lily, this is exactly what we expected," he told me when I brought him the letter. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Mental incompetency, undue influence, even claiming that the will doesn't reflect your true intentions. But we have documentation for everything. How long will this process take? It depends on how aggressively they want to fight it. If they're just trying to scare you into changing your mind, it could be resolved quickly. If they're serious about contesting, it could take months or even years. I have time, Harold, and I have the truth on my side." The legal battle that followed was exactly as ugly as I'd anticipated. My children hired an expensive attorney who specialized in will contests, and they began a systematic campaign to portray me as a confused, bitter old woman who was making irrational decisions out of spite. They submitted statements from friends and neighbors claiming I'd seemed different since my heart attack, more angry and hostile than usual. They requested extensive medical records, hoping to find evidence of cognitive decline or medication side effects that might have affected my judgment. Most painfully, they brought in character witnesses, who testified that I'd always been a devoted mother, that this sudden change in behavior was completely out of character and therefore evidence of mental incompetence. They were using my love for them as evidence against me, arguing that no rational mother would disinherit her children. But Harold had been thorough in his preparation. Dr. Hendrick's psychological evaluation was comprehensive and unambiguous. The video statement I'd made was clear and articulate. My medical records showed no evidence of cognitive impairment or any conditions that might affect my decision-making capacity. Most importantly, Harold had insisted that I undergo a second psychological evaluation during the legal proceedings, just to demonstrate that my mental state hadn't changed. Dr. Hendricks conducted another thorough assessment and reached the same conclusion. I was completely competent to make decisions about my estate. The turning point came when Harold deposed my children individually. Under oath, they were forced to admit the details of their behavior during my hospitalization. They had to acknowledge that they'd all been healthy and available during the week I was in the hospital. They had to confirm that they'd gathered for Christmas Eve dinner while I was alone in my hospital room. When Maria was asked directly why she hadn't visited me in the hospital, she gave a rambling answer about having house guests and holiday obligations that sounded petty and selfish even to her own attorney. When Roberto was pressed about his claim that he was too busy with work emergencies, he had to admit that his definition of emergency included routine service calls that could have been handled by his employees. Sophia's deposition was the most damaging to their case because she was honest about her regret and acknowledged that their behavior had been inexcusable. Her attorney tried to argue that her remorse proved the family could be reconciled, but Sophia herself admitted under oath that she understood why I felt betrayed and abandoned. The judge who presided over the case was a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, and it became clear during the hearings that she had little patience for adult children who felt entitled to their parents' money. When Maria's attorney argued that no rational mother would completely disinherit her children, Judge Morrison responded sharply. "Counselor, the question before this court is not whether Mrs. Torres made the decision you think she should have made. The question is whether she was mentally competent to make her own decision. The evidence clearly shows that she was." When Roberto's attorney tried to argue that my decision was based on temporary hurt feelings rather than rational thought, Judge Morrison cut him off. "The evidence shows that Mrs. Torres's decision was based on a pattern of behavior spanning years, not a single incident. Adult children do not have an inherent right to inherit their parents' property, regardless of how entitled they may feel." The final hearing was held on a rainy Thursday in March. nearly 3 months after the legal proceedings had begun. I sat in the courtroom with Harold, watching my children and their attorneys make their final arguments for why my will should be declared invalid. Their lawyer painted a picture of a confused, hurt woman making irrational decisions based on temporary emotional trauma. He argued that my heart attack had affected my judgment, that I wasn't thinking clearly when I changed my will. Harold's response was devastating in its simplicity. He presented the timeline of my decision-making, showing that I'd waited over a week after leaving the hospital before contacting him. He presented evidence of my careful financial planning over the years, demonstrating a pattern of rational, long-term thinking. He presented Dr. Hendrick's evaluations, showing that my cognitive function was completely normal. Most effectively, he played portions of my video statement, letting the judge hear my calm, rational explanation of my reasoning in my own words. Judge Morrison deliberated for less than 30 minutes before returning with her decision. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court finds that Mrs. Lillian Torres was mentally competent at the time she executed her will. The evidence clearly demonstrates that her decision was made rationally, after careful consideration, and with full understanding of the consequences. The court notes that while the petitioners may disagree with Mrs. Torres' decision, disagreement is not grounds for invalidating a will. Adult children are not entitled to inherit their parents' property simply by virtue of being children. Furthermore, the court finds the testimony regarding Mrs. Torres' treatment during her hospitalization to be particularly relevant to understanding her state of mind. The decision to prioritize holiday celebrations over visiting a hospitalized parent demonstrates a pattern of behavior that any rational person might find hurtful and disrespectful. The will contest is dismissed. Mrs. Torres's will stands as written. The courtroom was silent for a moment, and then I heard Maria let out a sound that was half sob, half rage. Roberto sat with his head in his hands, and Sophia just stared at the floor. Their expensive attorney gathered his papers with the resigned efficiency of someone who'd known this outcome was likely. Harold squeezed my hand as we stood to leave. "It's over, Lily. Your will is secure." As we walked out of the courtroom, I felt a profound sense of closure. The legal battle had been emotionally draining, but it had also been validating. A judge had listened to both sides of the story and concluded that I was not only mentally competent, but that my decision was understandable given the circumstances. My children didn't speak to me as I left the courthouse, didn't even look in my direction. They huddled with their attorney, probably discussing whether to appeal, though Harold had already explained that their chances of success on appeal were virtually non-existent. That evening, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, looking at the legal documents Harold had given me, confirming that my will was now legally secure. Barring extraordinary circumstances, my estate would be distributed exactly as I'd specified when I died. I thought about the irony of the situation. My children had spent months and thousands of dollars trying to prove that I wasn't competent to make my own decisions, when the reality was that I'd never been more mentally clear in my life. The heart attack that had started this entire chain of events had been a wake-up call, forcing me to confront truths about my family that I'd been avoiding for years. The legal victory felt satisfying, but it was also bittersweet. I'd won the right to dispose of my property as I saw fit, but I'd also confirmed that my children were exactly who I'd feared they were: selfish, entitled adults who saw me as a source of financial security rather than a person deserving of love and respect. Over the following months, I began to build the new life I'd envisioned for myself. I increased my volunteer work at St. Jude's and the Denver Rescue Mission, finding purpose and satisfaction in helping people who genuinely appreciated my efforts. I joined a book club for seniors, made new friends who shared my interests, and even started taking art classes at the community center. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself, rather than waiting for my children to include me in their lives. I discovered interests and talents I'd forgotten I had, made plans based on what I wanted, rather than what my family needed from me. Sophia attempted to reconcile several times, calling and even visiting occasionally. Our conversations were polite but strained, and I could see that she was genuinely trying to rebuild our relationship. But the damage was too deep, the trust too broken, for things to ever return to how they'd been before. I appreciated her efforts, and I didn't discourage them, but I also didn't allow myself to hope for too much. Sophia's newfound attention felt reactive rather than genuine, motivated by guilt and the desire to prove she was different from her siblings rather than by authentic love and respect. Maria and Roberto made no attempt at reconciliation. According to Sophia, they blamed me entirely for the family's dissolution and had convinced themselves that I was a vindictive woman who destroyed their inheritance out of spite. They told people that I'd had a mental breakdown after my heart attack, that I wasn't the same person I'd been before. I found their interpretation amusing rather than hurtful. They needed to believe I was crazy or cruel, because accepting the truth, that they'd driven away their mother through their own selfishness, was too painful for them to acknowledge. David, my son in Phoenix, reached out exactly once after the will contest became public knowledge. He called to express his disappointment in my decision and to lecture me about the importance of family forgiveness. When I pointed out that he hadn't spoken to me in over a year before this call, he became defensive and ended the conversation quickly. The most unexpected consequence of my decision was how much it improved my relationship with my grandchildren, at least Sophia's twins. As she made more effort to include me in their lives, Isabella and Emma began to see me as a real person, rather than just a distant grandmother who occasionally gave them presents. Isabella, who was 12, was particularly drawn to my art classes and began visiting me regularly to paint together. Emma, who was more athletic, started inviting me to her soccer games and school events. For the first time, I felt like I was developing genuine relationships with my grandchildren based on shared interests and mutual affection rather than obligation. It was ironic that by cutting my children out of my will, I'd actually improved my relationship with the next generation. The twins responded to my newfound confidence and independence, seemed to respect me more when I stopped being the desperately accommodating grandmother who tried too hard to please everyone. As my 73rd birthday approached, I realized that the past year had been the best year of my adult life. Not because it had been easy or comfortable, but because it had been honest. I'd stopped pretending to be satisfied with scraps of attention and had demanded to be treated with the respect I deserved. I discovered that I was stronger than I'd realized, more capable of independence than I'd believed, and more worthy of genuine love than I'd allowed myself to hope. The woman who'd entered the hospital with chest pains on December 20th had been replaced by someone who knew her own value and refused to accept anything less than she deserved. The legal victory had been important, but the personal transformation had been life-changing. I'd spent 47 years defining myself as someone's mother, someone's caregiver, someone's support system. Now I was finally learning to be simply Lily Torres, a complete person with her own dreams, interests, and value. My estate would go to organizations that would use it to help people who truly needed assistance. My legacy would be one of independence, self-respect, and the courage to demand better treatment from the people who claimed to love me. And my remaining years would be spent on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued my presence rather than tolerated it. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your children is to stop enabling their selfishness. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give them is the opportunity to face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't appreciate what you have to offer. My children had taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one they'd intended. They'd taught me that blood doesn't automatically create family, that being a mother doesn't mean accepting whatever treatment your children choose to give you, and that it's never too late to start putting yourself first. For that lesson, I was genuinely grateful. It had cost me nearly $700,000 in inheritance, but it had given me something far more valuable: my self-respect, my independence, and the knowledge that I was worth fighting for. The woman who'd spent Christmas Eve alone in a hospital bed had been weak, desperate, and willing to accept whatever scraps of love her children chose to offer. The woman I'd become was strong, independent, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her well-being. That transformation, more than any legal victory or financial decision, was the real triumph of my story. I'd finally learned to value myself as much as I'd always valued my children, and that knowledge had set me free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.